Hi guys, and welcome for that video about the conditional perfect, which is one of the fancy tenses you will have to use in the writing and in the speaking exam at A level. So, when do you use it first? That tense, the conditional perfect, you use it to say what you would have done if something else had happened, for example. So, because it's called the conditional perfect, it still follows that rule from the conditional that you have seen in the past, which is you need to have some form of condition. You need an if somewhere, not necessarily written, but at least implied in your sentence. So, if we look once again on a timeline, hoping that it will help a tiny bit, let's do a timeline where your present is here. You could say, uh, I would have done my homework if my parents had bought me a book to do it in. So I'm running out of examples, really sorry, that's a bit rubbish, but never mind. I would have done my homework will be here, and that would be the conditional perfect. If my parents had bought me a book, that would be an anterior action condition that hasn't been met, and therefore I can't do it here. I can't do my homework if I don't have the book. Don't give me that excuse ever. But if they had bought me, that would be in the pluperfect here. So there you go. That's a bit the structure. You could build a sentence using the conditional perfect, probably with another construction, but if we take that example where something else had, if something else had happened, that action would be prior to the action in the conditional perfect. I hope that makes sense. So, how do you form it now? Well, let's go back to the very basic perfect tense that you know off by heart now. Example, I have revised, j'ai révisé. I don't think I need to explain how that is built, but we can reuse some of that here to build our conditional perfect. So, I would have revised, that's formed of, here is my auxiliary with my subject pronoun, replacing all of that. So I would have, I know you've got 3 words in English, I only have 2, well, 1.5 even, because there's no E. So I only have 2 in French here. And that's your auxiliary in the conditional. And then, to form the conditional perfect, well, you've got your past participle, which once again is the mark of any perfect tense. So let's look at that rule more clearly. So, subject pronoun, I said that, je, but you could have any of the others. The auxiliary to have in the conditional, and then your past participle, which follows the normal rule, provided that your verb is regular. So, in more details, here, I would have, you would have, he would have, that's all your subject pronouns plus auxiliary to have in the conditional, which implies that you need to know the verb to have in the conditional. If you don't, all the rule is re-explained in the video about the conditional. Towards the end, you have a table with all the irregular verbs. So if you need a refresher on that, go back to the other video. But here it is. So j'aurais, tu aurais, il aurait, elle aurait, etc. That will be the beginning of your conditional perfect. Then you have the past participle, and I'm going to go really quickly on this because you have seen that times and times if you have watched the other videos. So you start with your infinitive in er, ir, or re. You take off those 2 letters. Instead of er, put an e accent. Instead of ir, put an I. Instead of re, put a u. Bim, sorted. And then you should have something like our 3 examples here. So if you want to say, I would have watched, well, I would have Follow the rule for the past participle in ER. Take off the ER, put the E accent. J'aurais regardé. She would have chosen. She would have. Apply the rule for chosen, which is choisir, but here we end with elle aurait choisi. And the verb to wait, attendre. If you want to say we would have waited, we would have. Follow the rule, waited. Nous aurions attendu. I'm going really quickly on that just because it's a regular pattern for a perfect tense, and if you have watched the video about the future perfect, I don't want to spend ages boring you with details, but I hope it's clear. And let's move to the exceptions. All the exceptions in the conditional perfect are exactly the same as in any other perfect tense. So if you have just watched the future perfect, we'll have the same exceptions. And if you are confused about the exceptions I'm going to explain right now, go back to the videos about the perfect tense. There are 3 of them, and everything is very detailed in those videos, whereas here I'm going to go fairly quick. So the first exception you may encounter, it's if your verb does not follow this rule. So if they have an irregular past participle. For example, the verb faire. If I were to follow the rule here, I would take off my ER and put a U, and I would be incapable of pronouncing the word resulting from that. So forget the rule, just learn that the past participle for the verb faire is fait. And that's something you really need to know, especially this one because it's so basic. So if your verb has an irregular past participle, well, that past participle will be irregular no matter what perfect tense you're using. So if you want to say I would have done, you will say I would have, you stick to that, but then for done, be careful, that's the part that is irregular. Second exception, if your verb is a Van der Trump. Here's the list of Van der Trump verbs. So they all express a movement, and most of them express a movement. There's a few odd one out. And if you remember your perfect tense, they have that little tweak that you need to do because they do not use the auxiliary to have, they use the auxiliary to be. So here, instead of having to have in the conditional, you will have to be in the conditional. So the verb être. Once again, if you don't remember the verb être in the conditional, go back to the video about the conditional tense. It's in that big table of irregular verbs. So let's look at one Van der Trump. For example, sortir, to go out. So if I want to say I would have gone out, I forget about that auxiliary once again, and I use the auxiliary to be, je serai, and then I follow my rule, at least if the verb is regular. Take off the IR, put the I, but the second thing you need to remember with a Van der Trump, the first, it's the auxiliary that is different. The second, it's that this past participle needs to agree with the subject. So please, if you're a girl, make sure you put an E. If you're using, for example, nous or vous or any plural pronoun here, make sure you agree at least with an S, possibly with an ES if it's feminine and plural. And the last exception, if your verb is a reflexive verb, like for example, se reposer. So, se reposer, I've got my infinitive with my reflexive pronoun here. Let's say I want to use the subject pronoun I. Then my reflexive pronoun will turn into me. If it were tu here, it would be te, il, se, etc. It depends what you use in the first place. Then remember that a reflexive works a bit like a Van der Trump in the sense that they use the same auxiliary to be. So here, je, me, serai, and then follow the rule, but once again, you need to agree that past participle with the subject. So if you want to say, I would have rested as a girl, put an E. If you're a boy, drop the E, you don't need it. There you go. That's for the rule. Once again, any clarification you need, well, you may put your question in the comments, or you can go back to the videos about the perfect tense or even the conditional tense for that part here. So let's do an exercise. I have 6 sentences here, all using the conditional. The conditional perfect, sorry. What really matters to me is that you get that conditional tense correct for now. Careful here, there is, and there are actually, some irregular verbs in the conditional perfect, and I'm pretty sure I have been super mean. I have put some Van der Trump and even some Van der Trump irregular in their past participle. So please, please, please check the irregularities in your notes or your grammar mat if you're using that. And so what really matters is the conditional perfect. There might be some tweaks in the end of the sentences. I will go over that in the correction. But for now, pause the video, take as long as you want. I have put extra vocab for you here. Careful, by the way, that's a reflexive. Make sure you figure out in what tense you use it. And take the time you want. I'll mark in 5 seconds. Okay, let's go. So, I would have studied science, but it was too hard. I would have. All of that is translated by j'aurais. Studied, étudier. Science, I know it seems to be singular in English, but it will be plural in French. So I would say les, because I need an article. Science. But it was no tricks here. It's a normal imperfect. It was to. And then I don't mind if you used dur or difficile, as long as it means too hard, that's fine. So j'aurais étudié les sciences, mais c'était trop dur. You would have had time for your homework if you had not played football. We're starting to make things a tiny bit harder here. So you would have tu, aurais, and then, so that's you would have, and then had has an irregular past participle that I didn't show you earlier, but that past participle is in the list that I put in the description of the video about the perfect part 2. So if you want some revision about the past participles, they are not all there, but there's quite a few irregulars in that description. Anyway, it is the past participle for had, it's eu. Tu aurais eu the time, le temps, for, your, tes, devoir, homework, if, si. And that's where it gets a bit tricky. If you get confused when you see that you had not played, what usually confuses you is that negation. So take it off, just to identify the tense you need to deal with. You had play, careful, it's not you have played. You have played would be the perfect, but you had played, that's the pluperfect. So you know now what tense you need to use. And you know also, I hope, that you need to introduce that negation around the auxiliary, so around the first part of your verb. Let's do that bit by bit. So, if you, tu, actually I'm going to really break it down. So, had, in the pluperfect, the auxiliary is in the imperfect. So, to form the full tense pluperfect, that bit here has to be in the imperfect. Jouer, that's not really tricky, that's your normal past participle. And I said that the negation would go around the auxiliary. So here, n'avait pas. si tu n'avais pas joué au foot. There you go. That's how you break it down. She would have come if we had invited her. She would have come. To come, there's that idea of movement, so it is a Van der Trump, but it is an irregular Van der Trump. I did warn you. So, the past participle for venir is venu here. So she had come, and careful also about the auxiliary. She would have come, elle serait, then your irregular past participle venu, and because it's a girl, the E at the end. That's a lot, I know. So once again, it's a Van der Trump, so I use the auxiliary to be. The past participle is irregular and needs to agree. That were three things to think about. If we had invited her, the difficulty doesn't stop here because that can be tricky too. So if, I don't care which we you use, I didn't specify, si on had invited, that's once again, that's my pluperfect. So avait invité. So that's in the imperfect, and that's your regular, normal past participle. And her is a direct object pronoun. Be careful here, because it will come before your auxiliary. So here or here in French. So si on l'avait invité. Obviously I put an apostrophe because I've got my vowel here. And that's the rule that I both love and hate in French, because it makes absolutely no sense. I still don't know where it comes from. But you have that direct object pronoun here, which comes before the auxiliary to have, no matter the tense of that. If you have a direct object pronoun before to have, you need to agree that past participle with that direct object pronoun. And in this case, the direct object pronoun is feminine because it's her. So I need an E. I think we have seen that in class, so go back to your lesson about direct object pronoun and indirect object pronoun, and it should be in your notes. I hope that was clear. We would have built a bigger house, but we didn't have enough money. So we would have built with nous. Nous aurions bâti. Here, there's no specific difficulty in that part, so that's why I actually go fairly quick. Take off the IR, put an I instead, aurions, that's just the basics. A bigger house, big. So you have a superlative or comparative adjective here. I'm not even sure, that looks bad. Never mind. So bigger, anyway, it's an adjective and it's in the bags. So the bags, remember, beauty, age, good or bad, or size. If it's one of those, it will come before the noun in French. So basically you follow the pattern that you have in English in this case. So nous aurions bâti une, plus, because that's the part for bigger, plus grande, and then maison. So here you go for the word order. To be fair, you could also say nous aurions bâti une maison plus grande. That works in this case, but let's follow the rule. But, mais, oui. And then here you have, we didn't have enough money. Now, if you think about that sentence in context, you can't really say, oh yeah, we wanted to build a bigger house, but on Monday we didn't have enough money. It's not a punctual event here. It's not something that was on a certain day or that was only a couple of hours. It's we didn't have enough money to build a bigger house. That's a long-term plan. Therefore, that action happened over an extended period of time, which should tell you you need to use the imperfect here. So, nous n'avions pas, enough, assez. You need that D apostrophe, beaucoup de, assez de, and then argent. There you go. Then you would have helped, but she didn't let you. You would have helped. I don't think there's any tricks here. Vous auriez aidé. So subject pronoun auxiliary to have in the conditional and past participle. But, mais, she didn't let you. And there you go for a new explanation here. You have didn't in both cases. But, like I said here, it was a long-term plan, extended period of time. That doesn't look like an extended period of time. It's you wanted, for example, you would have helped her with her homework, but she didn't want you. She didn't let you. It's not, unless she did your homework for 10 years, it's not an extended period of time here. So you need to use the perfect tense. So, elle, for she, and you need to build your perfect tense. Once again, I'm going to break it down. A, so that's your auxiliary, have, let, then laisser. So far that means, but she let you, let. So I still need to include the negation and the you. So, the you, once again, is a direct object pronoun. So it needs to go before the verb here. And I still have my negation that needs to go around the auxiliary, but it will go around the auxiliary and the direct object pronoun. Elle ne t'a pas laissé. And I didn't let enough space. Sorry, it's a bit rubbish. Elle ne t'a pas laissé. Now, once again, following that rule about direct object pronouns and agreement, if you is a girl, I would need to put an E. But let's say here, because I use the vous plural, and unless you use the formal version that could be singular, at least it's plural, so I need an S here. I'm sorry this is so crumped. I'm going to rewrite it clearly. Elle ne t'a pas. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm really messing up with this one because, sorry, I shouldn't do that. I'm really bad here. But I used vous at the beginning, so actually forget all about that. Elle ne vous a pas, and then laissé. And now you really have to put the S because you have vous. Sorry about the confusion. And if you write that sentence like that, now it's correct. Vous auriez aidé, mais elle ne vous a pas laissé. That sounds fine in French. It's not the most fluent, but we will make perfect sense if we say that. However, to sound fully fluent, you could say, she didn't let you do. Elle ne vous a pas laissé faire. That's the most fluent way in French to say that. Okay, last example. I hope you're not discouraged because there was quite a few tricky grammar points here, but hopefully, as long as you have the conditional perfect correct, that's fine. They would have watched the film, but they fell asleep. Once again, fell asleep. It's not over an extended period of time, it's quite punctual, so I will need the perfect tense here. They would have watched, ils or elles auraient regardé le film, mais, but, il. And actually for me, I think the real difficulty here might appear here because you've got Van de Trump in the perfect tense. So il, se, because I need that reflexive pronoun. Serait, the auxiliary, sorry, I was going to put it in the conditional perfect where it's the perfect tense. So ils, se, sont. Your auxiliary needs to be in the present. endormi, with an S, because with a reflexive you need to agree the past participle with the subject. Well, now that I have made at least a couple of mistakes in that correction, you see it's not as easy as it looks, so I hope that makes you feel a bit better if you have made some mistakes. And if you haven't made any, well, you should definitely be proud of yourself, because that means you beat the teacher. So well done you. I hope that tense will come in handy. Once again, it's one of the fancy ones that look really nice in the writing or in the speaking at A level. So once again, practice, 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 and you will nail it in the exam. See you guys.